Hello, Mandibil here. I'm going to give a little comment on a Stefan Molyneux video. Yes, my nemesis, Stefan Molyneux. Not exactly, but he's my, favorite perversion. And isn't that an old movie by Woody Allen? There's, it's just weird with this guy, right? The more I dig into what he's saying and try to analyze his books, and the more freaky it gets. And this video here is certainly another nail in that coffin, right? And I'm not trying to poison the well or anything like that, right? Certainly, it's what's the word I'm looking for? It's appreciative. I appreciate when people try to find a moral principle, right? When they try to say, well, there's something wrong in the world, things doesn't work, right? It can't be. I mean, even if with a free market, it can't be the case that there are some people who can get sort of rich on taking advantage of the state, while the state is supposed to protecting the poor and then taking advantage of the poor and so on. They're just things that doesn't work, right? Why are there so many single moms and all this, right? There are just things that doesn't work. And when you wind it all down, it has to be dealing with morality or moral principles, or a lack of moral principles, and sophistry and manipulation and so on, right? So it's I appreciate when people it's a noble cause, I would say, to try to find a moral principle. But the point with Stefan Molyneux is he hasn't found any, right? He hasn't found any moral principles. It's just the old NAP, which was possibly made 150 years ago by some, anarchist, right-leaning anarchist philosopher or economist or whatever, right? Bastiat, something like that, right? And then he thinks I'm pretending there's no morality, and then he makes a moral principle. He makes a moral framework for ethics, right? To which to check moral statements. And lo and behold, NAP, which he has knowledge of before he made the book. And people have that knowledge of for, let's say 100, 120, 50 years, right? So, and lo and behold, it checks out with this system, right? It's like, come on, man, you can have a moral principle before you start. And then you make a framework that basically validates that principle, right? Even if it did validate it, you should be very cautious of arguing this way, right? And there are all sorts of other problems. And you can, down in the description, there's a link to my deconstruction of his book called Universally Preferable Behaviour, or UPB, which clarifies and clearly points out all the various flaws there are in his arguing. And most notoriously, he doesn't really define anything effectively, right? The only decent attempt at a definition in his book is about truth, and it's so convoluted that I can't even understand what he's trying to say. And even if I did make some sense of it, I would have to reject it because I would be so skeptical about my deconstruction that I wouldn't believe that it was in concordance with his ideas of what he's trying to say. So he's kind of and he has this when he published his book in 2007, or there, I think it was 2007 if I don't remember incorrectly, that he made a little video where he presented the first chapter or something he read out loud, and he said, I think I found the holy grail of philosophy, right? So if you have that approach to your writing, that you must be sort of perfect, right? I wrote it, therefore it's perfect. You can't criticize it. It's there. The book is there. I've proven it, right? And another thing is, one of his arguments is basically that if you argue against me, or if you try to argue against any argument in my book, you prove that I'm right, right? This kind of vanity, maybe it is, right? It's kind of vanity. I must be right because I wrote it. It's me. I'm the philosopher, right? Everybody coming to criticize me, they're out to get me, right? So, and this is something that has slowly but surely turned free domain into a kind of cult, right? Even if he believes he's not running a cult, he is de facto running a cult, right? Because, and of course, he wouldn't say, if people say it's slightly cultish, this, right? He wouldn't say, yes, sure, it's slightly cultish. I don't want it to be cultish, but it has become cultish. So what? I need to make some money, right? He'll never say that. Of course, he would reject it, right? But what is the problem is that the writing is bad. Nobody understands it. People keep asking him questions about what do you mean about that or this or the other, right? And like the most notable example might be Rationality Rules about 1.5 years ago asked him basically about his core argument in his book. And he pointed out that this might be circular, right? And he basically says, I don't care, right? You have to read the whole book to understand what is in this so-called syllogism that proves my book, right? So if it's and it is just this kind of sophistry, right? Well, if this statement you established here, you put it in as a line 1, line 2, line 3, and this is a syllogism, and sort of highlighting that and extracting that as presented as some kind of extraction of your book, and then saying that part is dependent on the rest of the book. Well, why did you make that part then, right? Don't present some extraction of your book to clarify things. And then when people ask, but I think there's something wrong with this clarification, you say, oh, no, it's dependent on the rest of the book. But then you're just shooting the reader in the foot or in the face or something like that, because you're sort of luring them into thinking there's something here. And when they just go to, clarify, you say, no, it's dependent on the rest of the book. So you're running people around in circles and then saying, but you're confused you're running around in circles because you're so stupid and you're confused, right? You need to just relax and listen to me. I'm the philosopher and you are the stupid people. You just give me money and I'll explain, right? So it's kind of ridiculous, right? Now, it has been at least 8 months or something like that since I started deconstructing UPB, and I haven't heard. I'm not the biggest guy on YouTube for certain, right? But that doesn't mean what I'm saying is incorrect or something like that. It doesn't. There's no limit that says you have to have 2,000 subs and then your theories, your critique will be correct or something like that, right? I've been flagged a long time ago for being politically incorrect, right? Anti-social justice, anti-state, anti-feminism, anti-anything under the sun that is sort of, you could almost say, without even having a moral principle, you could say this has got to be immoral, right? So, but he doesn't want that. So now I'm slightly poisoning the well here, right? But I'm trying to introduce where we're heading into. I've heard the first half an hour of this two and some hour long UPB show, and it's because it's UPB or morality, ethics, and virtue, and whatever term he uses, that I'm deconstructing it or commenting deconstructing, because UPB is I mean, I could really not care about his metaphysics or his epistemology or his idea of objectivity if he hadn't made a book about ethics, right? Which he claims is a holy grail of philosophy, and nobody understands them, and that's because they're too stupid, kind of that sort of notion, right? And that's why I'm still interested in Stefan Molyneux. I want to bring this shit down. I don't want people to be caught up in this entanglement of sophistry called universally preferable behavior. It's because it's so badly argued that you don't understand what he's saying, right? There is no ethics in there, right? There is no philosophy, right? He's just doing what he claims everybody else is criticizing him by. He's not making rigid definitions, right? And in the next book he writes a new definition of the same term, like truth, right? You can find possibly 6 or 7 different definitions of truth, right? Why? Because he makes it up as he goes along, right? It has to fit into the context he's writing this book. He doesn't care about rigidity, right? So it has to be brought down. People have to understand this doesn't work, right? And if he was just babbling on about metaphysics and epistemology in his little echo chamber there, I wouldn't care, because, I mean, why would I? No, but he claims to have found the fucking holy grail of philosophy, which is how to establish morality, whatever term you want to use on it. I would say it's a moral principle, a perfect moral principle, or a perfect principle. That's the moral principle. It has to be a perfect principle, right? And he claims he has found that, and he constantly, squiggles around and tries to manipulate to get people away from critiquing his shit, right? And this is another example, and that's why I'm taking it on, right? I'm fed up with his bullshit, to be honest, right? And also, to me, it's a good exercise in identifying bullshit and identifying sophistry, because for all I'm worth, right, he's a brilliant sophist, right? He can pretend to be a philosopher while constantly sophistering you, right? What is the word? That's brilliant. A sophist wants you to believe that you're not a sophist, right? If he said, yes, I'm a sophist, I'm a very good sophist, right? Then people would, be on their guards, right? But he has to say that it's the other person, right? If you can say that the philosophers, or those who want to at least attempt to make some rigid philosophy, they're the sophist, right? And I'm right because I'm the philosopher while being the sophist. Then he's got you by the balls, right? And then this is what is going on with Stefan Molyneux. Okay, let's head to it. This might be a very long deconstruction. I don't know. I'm not even sure how long it is. It's more than 2 hours. This, and he starts to ramble on all sorts of I don't know. It's just it's himself talking to himself, sort of. Sometimes I have the notion that his philosophy show is a kind of self-therapy of some kind, right? He's not trying to enlighten anybody. He is trying to keep himself kind of balanced mentally by having this show, right? And the problem with that is that it's a kind of vanity. It's a kind of vanity. And then you will see any criticism as an attack on your little baby called your book. It's my book. Oh my God, they're attacking my book. It's not really philosophy. It's your personal therapy and your personal, fairy tale world that you're creating to feel good. And when people come to knock on the door and say, I might think there's something wrong over here in your thinking, then you say, get out, you're trying to destroy my perfect world. So that's the sense I get, right? He's not into arguing. He's not into debating. He's into, this is how I see the world. And if you don't agree with me, there's something wrong with you. That's the kind of level he's on, right? And that's a fairly big problem if you want to be the greatest philosopher of all time, right? Okay, let's head into it.
Yes, it's Steph. We're going to do all things UPB. It's going to all be sorted today. It's all sorted. It's all over. It's all done
with. Okay, so he's speaking to the congregation, right? He's speaking to his little followers. He's saying, it's all, the big philosopher is going to solve everything for you. You don't need to read any books. You just need to listen to my magic words, and you will be fine. Everything will be clear to you. You will see the world through a tunnel of eternity, and right, something like that, right? This is, come Oh, holy crap! Nobody in no decent, skeptical, rigid philosopher would start up a debate or whatever, a chat, a talk like this, right? You will find everything. You will be in your sin zone when I'm done with you. You will feel perfect. You will have eternity of love, and right? This kind of, and it's also when it's something that is he's referring to a guy who apparently have criticized or attempted to criticize this UPB, and he's going to sort of use him as a stepping stone to herd his little congregation into obedience, right? That's what I see this is about, right? So it's like it's right out of the gate he's bitch slapping people into it. You just listen here and you listen and understand, and you should possibly expect that if you don't understand or obey, you're going to be kicked off my platform, right? I'm only collecting people who feed my vanity, right? It's like it's ridiculous, right?
And there will be never any doubts you can march forward as secular ethics crusaders and take on the hordes of subjectivists around.
Flowery, sophist language. You can march on with your secular ethics while I'm talking about Christians over here, and right? But secular ethics, and you can march on. Now you will be certain about everything because I'm Mr. Certainty. I can explain everything by talking to myself, right?
And moral realists and Sam Harrisoids of the world, because we are going to sort it all out today.
But that would be a good idea. Debate. You would be very sort of on par with Sam Harris. According to your UPB book, you say that UPB equals a scientific method, right? At least in one of your presentation. UPB equals scientific method. Sam Harris is trying to use the scientific method to prove there's morality. I mean, right? Yeah, he doesn't support the free will, which is kind of stupid, right? Because he has a lot of opinions about how people should be handled in the future if they don't behave as he thinks. So it's kind of bullshit, right? But it's up your alley. It's right up your alley. Why don't you ask him over, right? Because he's a very good sophist, right? You wouldn't have you wouldn't want a good sophist to be on your show so he can point out shit in your philosophy, maybe, right? No, you want to grab onto some little peon who thinks he's got sort of approach at your high level of philosophy, and then fucking rail against him. Use him as a ladder or stepstone to not make philosophy, but look at that idiot, how badly he argues. Therefore, my ethics must be right. Okay? That's the kind of attempt. Then the other example the other day with these communists he debated, right? Why is he so happy about debating communists, right? He has debated 10 times more communists than he's debating anarchists, right? Or real anarchists, right? Not these pretenders of people who want to get rid of the government. The communists don't want to get rid of the government. They want everything to be government, right? And he debates them because they're so far out that he can easily point at their contradictions, that they're bullshit, and say, well, see how crazy my critics are, and therefore I must be right. It's a sophist trick, right? It's just a sophist trick.
The brush fire will clear forth a new forest of lush virtue. Okay, so this dude, and I thought he was going to be here, but again, he had other things to do. I'm sure there's a good reason for it. I've had a history of not just now, but in the past 16 years, even before that, people come on real strong. Your theory is crap. And then you're like, oh, can we debate it? No, I'm busy.
That's not totally correct, right? Now you're talking to the greater the greater area of free domain, right? You're talking to those outside who has not experienced the inside of what's going on, right? Because that's the land of sophistry, right? The inside, and I've been there for like 3 or 4 days, attempting to debate with Stefan Molyneux, trying to point out flaws in his metaphysics, his epistemology, and not least his UPB, right? His ethics. And the only thing I wouldn't do would be a live debate, right? I wouldn't do a live debate because I'm first of all, English is not my first language, right? And secondly, I'm not a sophist, right? And I need a little time to think about my answers and so on. I wouldn't want to be kicked around in the arena just like he's doing with his guests, right? And it hadn't been that long since rationality rules had been kind of pissed in the face by Stefan Molyneux when Stefan Molyneux asked him on his show to debate UPB, and then when the rationality rules points out some problem in his core argument in the UPB, he says, well, I don't care about that, it's stupid, right? So they and then proceeding to find something about rationality rules that isn't correct, right? So it's just kind of attack, and ridicule or something like that, and not about the real stuff, right? So who would want to go into an arena fighting with an idiot like that? It's like you have to do a wrestling competition, and he has a knife, or he bitch slaps you sometimes. When it's like, but you're not playing by the rules you're trying to set, and you are exactly not playing by the rules, because if you did, you wouldn't be able to argue the way you do, or you wouldn't be able to sophistically get rid of people in order to frame your philosophy as being good, right? You are using people, you are crowd controlling opposition in a way, right? Rationality Rules had a great following. I think he had about 250,000 followers on YouTube. And when he starts to hammer at your UPB, you try to bring him in to try to pull him down rather than lift yourself up, right? That's the only conclusion you can get. You bring him in because he has that many followers, and he might actually be able to tear your UPB down. And you try to get him in to sort of crowd control him, you could say, right? Or use him as a crowd control so that your congregation does not lose faith in your philosophy, right? Even that if many of them might have done, because rationality rules, he's not the greatest philosopher on earth, but he actually went with the best he's got, right? And that is pointing out circular structure in your core argument in UPB, which is fine. I mean, you call it a syllogism. It is not even a syllogism, right? And I point that out in my deconstruction of UPB, which you can find in a link down below, right? So it's all about manipulating people. So if you go into the arena, make a video debate with Stefan Molyneux, you are just, if you're actually getting close to pulling him down or attacking his really attacking or getting, undermining his arguments, right? Then he'll try to use some sophistry like, that's boring, right? No, let's talk about your videos instead, right? So you can sort of counterattack and, get people down instead. This is sophistry, right? He's not trying to invite people in to get a higher understanding, like Socrates, who never settled on anything. He didn't write a book and say, this is the book, and I'm proving it. It's the holy grail of philosophy, right? No, he constantly challenged himself. Apparently, that's the fairy tale we have, right? And wanted to discuss with people, right? He was kind of a sophist. Yes, Socrates was possibly a kind of sophist, but at least a decently honest sophist, maybe. But he had used sophist tricks in his ways. Now and again, you can see it in the dialogues of Plato. There's sophistry there, right? So, and when people try to confront him and say, well, why don't you present something, Socrates? Oh, no, you can't attack an old man. And no, let's not talk about this anymore, right? And that kind of, you hear that from Socrates, right? So Plato apparently tried to make certain that we got some kind of broader idea of Socrates. But this kind of just saying, well, it's boring to talk about this. I mean, we are dealing with the core argument of your holy grail of philosophy, where a critique is that there might be something that is circular in it. Well, if you were a really good, decent, with high standards philosopher, right? You would say, holy shit, let us delve into this. Let's see if there could be something wrong here, right? Let's see if there is a problem, because I would want to know if there's a problem. Then I would have to retract my whole proof of UPB. But no, you don't want that, do you, right? Because if you don't have UPB, you basically have nothing, right? Because if you are moralizing about this, that, or the other, and people say, okay, but what's your moral system? They say, I don't have a moral system, right? Who are you then to moralize, right? So UPB, whether it works or not, you don't care. You just want this UPB to have this hammer to say, well, I wrote UPB and therefore I can moralize, right? And if people criticize UPB and find a flaw in it, and it crumbles, well, then you do have nothing to moralize about, right? So my nose is scratchy. So it's just, let's head on.
Oh, I'm so sorry. I got stuff to do, man. Oh, love to.
Yeah, I wanted to get back. Sorry about that. I got lost in a tangent. But I went on his show. I gave him a $5 month or $3 donation or something like that for 1 month to get in behind the curtain and in order to attempt a debate, right? And the only thing I said is when he said debate, I said when he invited me, I was, I boasted out so he would recognize me, he would notice me, right? And then I would try to debate him, and then he invited me in and said, okay, come over here in the live stream or whatever, recording, whatever it's called in Discord, right? I say, no, I'm not debating live, I'm doing it on text, right? And then he says, no, we can't do it in text. Why not? Well, that's not how we do it here. We only do it live. Okay, so I got the point, right? If he's going to debate anybody, it's going to be completely on his home field, and his people in the chat going to attack you and whatever his flying monkeys he has and narcissistic supply in his behind the curtain freedom in realm there, right? And so you're going to feel all alone, and they will be sort of, it's like a sort of a gladiator fight, right? You're up against the 10 lions or something like that, and a dragon, which is Stefan Molyneux, the big spider in the net, right? And they're going to tear you apart if they can get away with it, right? And you will get kicked around in sophistry and out on a tangent, right? Just look at the debate with some guy in 2015 or 16 called Nihilist versus Philosopher. Is morality, does morality exist, or something like that? Nihilist versus Philosopher. And I have deconstructed on my channel some 7 or 8 months ago, so you can go and find it here. And if you look in the playlist of deconstructing UPB, it's also placed as the last three videos in that playlist, so you can find it there also. How he treats people who are actually decent at arguing philosophy. He doesn't want people arguing philosophically, right? So he wants to find, you can come and argue if you want to do it on screen and live, and you have to be focused and so on. You don't have time to sit and write something and construct it and have that sort of more formal debate, let's say, right? And then he's going to say, but then they just shut off. They don't want to debate me. No, that's no wonder. They want to be kicked around by a star sophist like you, right? And those who are sort of, and also those in your congregation or your acolytes, your apostles there in your show, or those who support you, they are kind of scared into submission, right? They understand that you can kick them around almost as you see fit, because you are going to pull out some kind of sophistry, and you're going to confuse your opponent and make them look ridiculous or something like that. And then you will, kick over the chessboard and say you have won, right? Or who would want to, be ridiculed like that? And maybe even if they were right, if everybody believes you're stupid, right, then you're being labeled as stupid. So who would want to take that chance, right? So you have to have some cojones to go up against Stefan Molyneux, not because he's a great philosopher, but because he's a great sophist, right? That's probably why people don't want to debate. They don't want to be, ridiculed by you. They don't want to be hung out as the guy who lost the debate against the great whatever, right? Who wants to have their, laundry put out for all to see, sort of, right? Or your weaker sides of arguing. You have to be a fairly good philosopher. You not only have to be good at philosophy, but you have to be very good at identifying or catching whenever you're up against a sophist who have when he uses sophist tricks, right? You have to be able to pinpoint exactly when it happens and reject it and go back to the core of the argument or debate and so on, right? And it's not that many people who have that ability. So it's no wonder you're not debating anyone. And if you're debating anyone, you're pulling out some guy in your Discord who said something without bringing in definitions or referring to a specific chapter in your book, and say, oh, you have to bring the quotes and the definitions. Otherwise, you're just an edgelord or something. Somebody who wants to manipulate, and there's something wrong with your psychology. And yeah. Right? Who wants that? Okay.
But it's.
And did I get to mention that he rejected me on Discord also because I started to ask questions about the cultish behavior of the organization, right? Two of the greatest points is he's the only one who sets the rules for how things are understood there, right? Everything is about Stefan Molyneux, and if he says it's okay, it's okay. If he says it's not okay, it's not okay, right? Everybody he pushes people out who are critical, right? And label them as they're not arguing correctly, or there's something wrong with them, or they're just edgelords or something. He's very good at labeling people as something wrong with them, right? And but a point I might make there is that when people come in and say, "Oh, Stefan Molyneux, I just read your book UPB, and it's so great," and then he's, "Oh, thank you, oh, thank you very much. It's saying such nice words." He's not saying, "Yeah, but what part of your book are you referring to that you think is good?" Right? You have to bring in, you have to have the quote where you can say, "Well, this is good," right? No. Then his vanity is all over the place. Then it's fine. Then you don't need any quotes to give him feeding his vanity. Oh yeah, and it's, oh, my book, oh yes, it's so great, isn't it? Oh yes. Okay,
not really possible. And again, I don't want to put him necessarily in that category, but I mean, what is more important than figuring out right from wrong? Reason equals virtue equals happiness. And for people,
what? Reason equals virtue equals happiness? Equal is not a good thing to use in an argument in philosophy, right? Equal is a mathematical notation. It's not philosophy, right? Don't use equal. What is equal? Is it that identical, or is it of the same category, or is what are you talking about, right? And this is one of these things that he always rails against, how badly people argue, right? They should argue this way or the other way or the third way. But when he does it, it's just like, reason equals virtue equals happiness. Yes, you see, I've solved it, right? I mean, reasoning is when you try to figure out, if I throw this rock against this fruit on that tree, that fruit might hit the fruit or the twig in a way that makes this fruit fall down so I can grab the fruit. That's reasoning, right? Or it could be, okay, if I buy this bicycle, I can, save 20 minutes when I'm going to work each day, and I will, get, whatever. This is kind of reasoning. This is reasoning, right? So equals virtue. What is that? What is virtue? Is that some kind of judgment of how much other people are, how close they are to violating a moral principle, something like that? If you're virtuous, you stay far away of potentially breaking a moral principle, right? If you're not virtuous, you're constantly sort of, to be a little black and white, right? You're very close to constantly, breaking a moral principle. Then you're not quite virtuous, right? You're signaling your behavior. Virtue is somebody else's judgment of your behaviors, of your moral behaviors, you could say, right? And how close they are to actually violating a moral principle. Because that's why other people, or I would judge another person of their virtue, because I wouldn't want somebody who's constantly balancing on the knife's edge and possibly could fall over to the immoral side anytime soon, right? So if they're making a virtue out of staying away from the moral high, or staying in the moral high ground, right? That's how what their behavior or their actions, it extends, and therefore I would label it as virtuous. But it doesn't mean that my virtue is the same as another person's virtue, right? Some might say that keeping your lawn, cut down every other day is virtuous, right? I might say, I don't really care too much about that, as long as it's not a jungle, right? So virtue is just also a flexible term. So how does throwing a rock against a tree to make a fruit fall down, right? How does that equal virtue, right? I could reason about if I take a knife and stick it into my mother-in-law, right, or something like that, a classic, and I may get some benefits from that, right? That's reasoning. What's the virtue, right? There's no automatic virtue to deduct from that without a moral principle, right? Happiness, okay. So if you are judging somebody else's virtue, or you are adjusting your own behavior in order for other people to find you virtuous, you could also say, but that's indirect virtue, right? You're trying to appeal to other people's understanding of your virtuousness, or your what's it called? Virtuousness? Virtuosity? No, that's something different. So you're just slamming these three big: reason equals virtue equals happiness. Equal is like apples equals tractor equals mammoth, right? It's like, okay, how do you get to that? These big sort of broad terms, they're never explained, right? But this guy who has said something about your book, he has to have, definitions of epistemology and, from here to eternity about quotes from the book, even if you might say, but that's boring. That's boring. You're taking my core argument. Why would you want to spend time on that? That's boring, right? So yeah, it's like, you want people to do something, and then you're going to throw them to the wolf anyway, right? So it's sort of bullshit.
Who have higher priorities than figuring out right from wrong on a Sunday. I have questions. I mean, the chance to have a debate and clarify your thinking with a prominent philosopher, boy, that's not something that comes along every day. It's not something that's
oh, his vanity. A prominent philosopher? Yes, you're prominent within your own congregation, right? You're preaching to the choir. It's those who can't help it, those who are not able to see how sophist you are, who are still coming around to, you might have said something that enlightened their life. And so that's great, I suppose, right? But it's not, it's like, oh, I'm the great philosopher. I am a prominent philosopher. Right? I'm prominent. And, it's not every day you get the chance to debate with me, like the king sitting on his throne and say, okay, little people, you can come up here and talk to me if you want, but you have to do it right. You have definitions, and you have to have quotes from my book. Yes, my book you can get for free because nobody wants to buy it. But it's like, oh, come on, man. Come on. The vanity. I'm such a great philosopher. You had the chance, but you blew it, right? You blew it.
Super common. And yet people just don't seem to be that keen on it when it comes to the facts. Okay.
To the facts? To the facts? Facts? To the facts? You were going to debate UPB or some critique of UPB, and now you're talking about facts? How can you talk about facts? Because your ethical system is something about universality, and it's something about preferability, and it's behaviors, right? Where are the facts in that? There's no fact. None of these three terms has anything to do with reality or facts. At least not directly. You could possibly make some kind of sophistry and say, yeah, if you go back in the argument, there's some reference to reality over here somewhere. But that's not what I use when I argue. I talk about purely abstract terms like universality, preferability, and behavior. And I might mind you, one of my big critiques of his system is that you can't use behavior to argue for anything in ethics or in morality, right? Because behavior is a category of actions that has the same purpose. How else would you define it, right? It's like eating. Eating is putting stuff in your face until you're fed, right? So you can further your survival, something like that, right? But there's nobody who says whether you're eating an orange, or you're eating a pizza, or you're eating an ice cream cone, or you're eating a dog shit, or whatever, right? So there's no particular object you can refer to in behavior, because you're talking about behaviors and not those particular actions within that set of types of actions who are labeled with this certain term of a behavior. So you're not referring to reality. That preferability, well, it's purely subjective, what I prefer, right? Somebody has to prefer something for there to be preferability, right? You can't go out and say, oh, in the forest or in the bush over there hangs a preferability. Let's look at it, right? It's not empirical, right? And universal is, it goes, what else could it be? Oh, that's a universal over there. Look, that's a universal. You can't do that. It's all abstractions. And now you're sort of facts. Why are you referring to a fact? A fact could be, this is a box, a glasses. What they call? It's called etui, like French in Danish, right? Etui, brille etui, glasses box. I don't know what it's called in English. So, but this is a fact. What? This is a fact. The fact is a glasses box, but this is sort of my glasses box, right? But it's glasses box. That's a fact. You could say the fact is this is my glasses box, right? It's not factual in the sense that there's no my on this, but it has certain, it has a sort of, it has been used and there's a small crack there. There's this thing inside, to wipe the glass and so on. And it has a certain color, certain use, and whatever. I can identify this as my particular instance of this kind of object, right? So this is the fact I'm going for. I'm not going for any old box for my glasses. I'm going for this particular box, and I need this fact in order to take my glasses and put it inside the box. I need this fact, right? This is a fact. Going to just put on my glasses again, right? So why do you need this to talk about morality? Because you're not talking about facts when you're talking about behavior. There you're only talking about behaviors. Actions are those who influences facts, objects, right? If you're sitting in front of me and I'm slapping you in the face, you are the object. You are the fact I am manipulating or interacting with, and which I might interact in a immoral fashion. So, But I can't do that if I'm saying behavior, right? It's a behavior, so it's not any particular. There could be some. I have a book or something. I'm slapping you with a book. I could take a bicycle and slap you with that. Then there's a new object, a new fact is involved in the situation. But that's not behavior. It's still slapping you on the face or something like that, right? No matter what tool I use. So without a reference to an action which hold a specific set of objects, you can't talk about facts. So why are you talking about facts when you're talking about morality, right? It's this kind of stupid sophistry when you dig down and find out he's full of shit, right? He's piss and wind, right? It's ridiculous.
A couple of quotes from the guy. And I no disrespect to him. This is just an object lesson. So he says, my problems with UPB are at a more fundamental level. I would bring up basic epistemological problems and
He would bring up, yeah. But he apparently didn't show up to the debate. So this is just his opening remarks, and I'm going to do this, I'm going to do that. I would talk about epistemology, I do talk about metaphysics, right? This is not he's not debating. I mean, I might have misunderstood this, but if this is some kind of statement he made before this apparent debate where he so apparently didn't show up, according to you, right? And there might be for reasons that I just mentioned, that he doesn't want to be thrown into the gladiator arena, right? And be torn up by you and your acolytes, and be made a fool of, even if he has have good arguments. He might be, kicked to the curb by you saying, well, it's boring. It's boring argument. I don't want to do this. Huh? So it's just sort of presenting where he would want to go. Actually, you should be thankful for him enlightening on you what he's going to argue with, so you can prepare.
Physical problems. I think it would be good for the people just getting into philosophy. Okay. I'm sorry, I just...
It's not a devilish laugh, right? It's like, oh, that little idiot, right? I can nail him so easily, right? I can use him as a tool to solidify my congregation, so they will attack anybody who comes to make even the simplest critique. And you can always say, you're not arguing correctly, you're not bringing in definitions, and you're not bringing in the quotes, and you're not bringing... Oh man, it's kind of disgusting, right? Oh, I want so badly to bring down this guy, man. He's so fucking creepy, right? He's almost like he's creepy. He's like oh my God.
It's so obvious when you've been around the block a couple of times. In fact, when you built the block in this particular case.
Oh, you built the block. Oh, oh, it's like when you ask, OnlyFans whether or not what you would bring to the table in a relationship, and she would say, well, I am the table. Oh my God. I built the block. Oh yeah, you're Mr. Philosophy. You're basically the only one in the world who can argue philosophically. Everybody else are idiots, right? You're so fantastic. You built the block? Holy fuck. Oh, man. So if you're such a great philosopher, right? Why did you go to acting school then? Right? If you started out 40 years ago or whatever, when you were mid-teens, started to read Ayn Rand or whatever, right? Why did you go to acting school? It's like, it's the most stupid decision if you want to be a philosopher, right? Start your own company, fine. But a salesperson, it's the professional sophist, right? Where you sort of try to juggle around words and convince people by using words. It's not, you can't say this software is good because it's good, right? You have to, yeah, but you can do this, you can do that. It's sophistry, right? Then you try to be a novelist. If you want to do philosophy, why are you starting up by writing fiction, right? Even if it has some philosophical undertones in sort of Iran fashion. Why are you not doing hardcore philosophy? Because the only way you could get to work from home to become a stay-at-home dad was if you could make some kind of work from home. So you needed something, and philosophy was all that was left when you couldn't do sophistry. So you choose to pretend to be a philosopher, right? And then you have to shroud it in libertarianism and all this, bullshit, right? It's not bullshit, but philosophy is pure, has to be pure. You don't have to connect philosophy to anything. It doesn't have to be secular. It doesn't have to be rational or anything like that, right? It's just philosophy. Philosophy is thinking about thinking, right? That's all it is. You writing what you're thinking about your thinking is a different kind of thing, right? That's not the philosophy. That's the transcription of your philosophy onto the pages, right? Philosophy is your thinking. That's where it starts. It's not about building the block or anything like that. No, my thinking about my thinking is as valid as your thinking about your thinking. There might be things that are, epistemology, metaphysics, ethics, it comes up, right? There are, similarities in the thinking. But that doesn't mean I built the block of philosophy over there and I went around it a couple of times and I've solved the problems. You just go and read my book and then everything will be perfect from now on. That's not how it works, right? That's only sophistry that works that way. And it's this sign of vanity, which is a sign of insecurity, and this combination of vanity and megalomania. And I'm pretty certain they're connected in some way, right? I'm not a psychologist. This megalomania, I built the block. It's like saying I built philosophy, right? Without saying it directly, right? It's disgusting. Oh my God.
Let me, I guess, ask you a question, right? So I posted a picture the other day of myself when I was a wee bit chunkier, about 30 pounds heavier. And about the time my daughter was born, I lost a bunch of weight, and 30 pounds was
a bunch of weight? I don't think that's good English, right? A bunch of weight?
So, and I've kept it off, and I actually weigh less now than I did when I was 18. So not bad for 55 and all that, right? But what I had to do, of course, was I had to change everything. Like if you want to lose weight and keep it off, as you know, like 97% of people, even if they lose weight, they don't keep it off, and a good percentage of those just regain more, right? So what do you have to do to lose weight? Well, you have to change everything. Like you have to change everything. I mean, you have to exercise more. You have to eat less. You have to make sure you get good sleep, because if you can't get good sleep.
So this is an analogy to what you're trying to say, right? Okay. I'm just making sure that I'm not getting lost in words here, because there's a big danger of that every time I listen to Stefan Molyneux.
Sleep, you can't generally lose weight. And you have to not return, gosh, when I 25 years ago, I'd have like an orange and a candy bar after dinner. Like I would eat a Mr. Big bar. Like I don't do that anymore. I can't even remember the last time I ate a full candy bar. I still have a nibble of chocolate here and there. My daughter likes making chocolate treats, and I'll have a nibble here and there. But you just have to change everything. And so there's a reason. I'm not, I know you guys aren't fascinated with my diet advice or anything like that, but you have to change everything and you can't go back. It's not a temporary thing, right? Chips, cookies, chocolate, candy, whatever it is, the 4 C's of the apocalypse. You just got to not have that stuff around. And you can never really have that stuff around. You go out for dinner. You can't have dessert. You take sugar in your coffee. You can't do that anymore. Right? So you just have to change your life and not change back. Now, the reason I'm saying all of this is that those are actual actions that are specific and you can do, right?
But you can't talk about actions, right? Specific actions. You need to differentiate between behaviors and actions. And you can't talk about facts. If you're going into UPB, which is your moral system, you are talking about behaviors. You have specifically said you are not dealing with specific actions, right? And specific actions are those with relation to specific objects. So now you have disconnected yourself from the world, from objects in any way, right? You could say that behavior is when you eat, you must eat some object, and therefore you are referring to an object. Yes, that's correct, but it's not enough to make a moral judgment, right? You have to have some reference to a specific object, not an orange in a way. You don't have to refer to a specific object like a specific orange or something like that, but you have to refer the reader into how to relate to that specific object with regards to morality, right? It has to be described how you do it, but you don't have to describe it for all fruits and all objects in the world, right? But you have to tell how you go there, right? But if you stop at behavior, you are not going there because you're not going into actions. So you can't go in and point, let people understand how do I get to my everyday where the objects are, right? And that's by reacting. When you say facts, no, you are disconnecting yourself from facts, right? You are constantly talking about behaviors. So you're not in connection with the facts.
Now, how much weight do you think I lose by describing a diet? Oh, you got to cut out your this, you got to add more of that. Here's what right? I mean, it doesn't do anything other than the 1 calorie it consumes you to say it, right? If you simply describe your diet, you're not losing weight at all. Now, if you actually change your actions, if you do something specific and actionable, okay, then you can lose your weight. But simply describing your diet. And so when I was in the business world, descriptions were bullshit. Always. Descriptions were bullshit. Right? So somebody would say...
But you didn't get to debate the guy, right? If he has made some kind of, let's say, synopsis of what he would like to debate in your whatever, what was supposed to be happening, which didn't happen apparently, you can't use that synopsis as his core arguments against you, right? How dare you, man, right? If he said, yeah, I want to debate this and debate that, fine. But you can't use that as the debate. You're violating you're using this guy as a tool to manipulate your audience, right? You're not giving him the chance to present those arguments by taking what he describes as sort of an overall label of what he would attempt to do if he were going to debate you, right? And you're taking that as the content of the debate and saying, but you're not describing anything. No, because he's not debating yet. Come on.
Well, we've got to have, this has got to be better specified, and we can't be overpaying for that, and we've got to make sure we drive profits on this. I mean, that's all bullshit. Like, give me something specific and actionable, or go away. Give me something specific and actionable.
Why do you say actionable? Again, you're talking about behavior in UPB, right? I want the listener to this video to understand that Stefan Molyneux only talks about behavior. That's in the title of his system, universally preferable behavior, right? It's not actions, universally preferable actions or something like that. It's behavior. So when he talks about actions, right, he's manipulating you, right? Hoping, or maybe he doesn't even understand what he's doing. He's just, off the top of his head, right, thinking he's so great that he can just talk and everything will be perfect, right? That if he talks about actions, you should reject it. Right? Every time he talks about actions, you just say, well, you can't talk about actions because it's behaviors, right? You can only talk about categories of actions, right? And whenever you get down to objects or anything like that, you should reject it because it's not in his proof about UPB, right? Just understand what he's saying. It's not really that difficult. You just have to deconstruct what the hell he says or tries to say in his book, right? I mean, I would recommend that you go through the deconstruction I made, and there's a link down here. But it's torturous, right? And I'm fully able to say that because I have done the deconstruction. And my conclusion is it's a pile of garbage, right? It's some of the worst philosophy I have ever set my eyes on, right? I would be hard-pressed to call it philosophy, right? Because there were some basic demands I would need to have settled, or, there would be a grasp of, right? Just like he's saying definitions and things like that is important, right? He doesn't define anything, or the few things he does are so confusing that you can't use them, right? And the core argument is bullshit. It's not even a syllogism, and syllogism can't be used for proof, and proof can't be used in philosophy. And, it's circular, and there's all sorts of freaking problems. Hume's is-ought gap, he violates constantly, right? There's so many problems in this book. It's a piece of garbage, right? And I can say that, with a straight face, because I've deconstructed the whole proof, right? The so-called proof of his system.
Away. Now, there are people in this world, and there's a lot of people in this world, and I think this guy might be one of them.
Oh, this guy may be one of those, right? Those bad people. They are only out to get you. They have something with their, their psychology. They are trolls. They are edgelords. Oh, the sophistry, right? The cultish sophistry, right? These are the ones you should attack. And attack those who can't argue philosophically, because they are attacking my bad philosophy. And I don't want that. I need that to make money. So I don't care if it's good philosophy. I need them, my little acolytes, my little, attack dogs, to go for these bastards who try to come and argue against me.
I call it an appeal to insecurity. It's an appeal to insecurity. So what
do you call an appeal to insecurity?
People do is they say, "Oh, UPB has so many problems. I can't even list them all." I mean, you got your
No, I can't even list them all. I will just, the list is the book, because the book is a piece of shit, right? Garbage. It's so badly argued. It's not even arguments, right? If you should put a label on it, it's like it's not philosophy, right? It's that bad, right? And I'm not trying to go out on a hyperbole, right? But at some point, right, things get so ridiculous that you have to say, okay, this is bullshit. I'm not going to spend my youth on trying to understand this piece of shit in the hope that I might find some little diamond somewhere, or some pretense of a diamond, right, in a pile of shit, right? It's awful, this book, right? And maybe it's just because it's so awful that, and at the same time, it's hard to point maybe exactly where the awfulness is, but it's sort of an underlying notion that you have, that you're constantly being manipulated somewhere, or maybe it's indirect manipulation in that he doesn't really know what he's doing. And it shines through between the lines that you in my observation, it's like you are not on the same, you're not on the same, what would be the word? He is never, it's like his thinking is constantly in another place from where his writing is, right? You don't feel that you are on par with his thinking, his philosophy. Well, he's thinking about thinking, right? But let's just call it thinking. But he's talking from a vantage point and directing words towards you. You are not being invited into his thinking. You are being told what to think, right? This is a sign of sophistry. If you are invited into a skeptical, personal, unauthoritarian way of thinking, then you are invited into the philosophy. But being told stories about history, and these are the bad people, these are the good people, and now I'm going to this kind, It's the format of the book that maybe is the biggest problem with the book, because you can't philosophize this way. It's not philosophy, right? You're not. It might be philosophy in your head, but we don't have your head. We are reading your words, not your head, for good reasons, right? You should understand that. That's metaphysics, right? The problem of other minds. So we are reading your words, and if you're using your words as a more like a Moses coming down from the hills, right, or from the mountain or whatever, and telling people this is the building I built, and you follow it, right? Then it's not philosophy. Come on. So and there are so many problems with that book, right? I mean, my deconstruction possibly only scratched the surface of the inherent problem that are everywhere in it, right? It's like nothing hangs together. It's the kind of book, when I read it, I'm just more confused than when I started to read it, right? Now, I have it myself, I think, a decent philosophy. It can still be improved. Certainly, there are still gray areas, right, where I'm sort of, I think it's around these things, but I'm not quite, settled yet, right? So, but this, it doesn't help me anyway. I'm even more confused, right? It's like, okay, why do you attack the problem this way instead of usually it's done this way? And there are all sorts of things that why is it a framework for ethics? I mean, people have been doing ethics for thousands of years, and now you have to create a framework for ethics. What is that? I mean, what the hell is that? So you make a framework for ethics, and then you do ethics to find the moral principle, or what? No. Finding the moral principle is not even a part of the framework. Believe it or not. No. You just make some kind of statement like murder is wrong, and then you can run that through UPB and then figure out whether it's okay or not. Right? You don't have to point out that the term murder is violating Hume's insult get. No, because he has solved that also by hand waving and saying, well, Hume says you ought not do this, and because he says this, it ought not, he's using an ought not against an ought not, and therefore it's an ought, and I can use all the oughts I want. It's fucking soft, stupid arguments like that. It's all also violating the understanding of what Hume is trying to say. He doesn't even understand what Hume is saying, right? That was saying. So it's this, and I bet you, I haven't watched the whole video, right? He's not going to point to any specific things in his book. He's just going to throw words around so that you feel confident that he is the boss of philosophy. He doesn't care whether or not UPB works or not. He has to have it in order to validate his fucking business model, right?
Metaphysical problems, you got your epistemological problems, you got your consistency problems, you got your self-contradictory problems, you got so many problems. I mean, clearly Steph is not a trained philosopher. He doesn't have a PhD from Harvard. He's an amateur, and it's completely obvious to anybody in the field. He's not taken seriously by anyone. Yeah, if UPB is so great, why hasn't it spread? And there are all these problems, and the book is so... These are all descriptions. They make...
Oh, yeah, but if it's only description, fine. This guy didn't get to do the debate, right? He might have presented his arguments, right? It sounds like he has some brains, right? And you want to destroy him before he even gets a chance to debate you, right? And you are possibly lucky that he didn't take upon your invitation out of fear that he's getting to be manipulated by a star sophist, right? And what was it? I had a point I was going to mention. I forget. I had to wind back.
Hey, me. So hi. Yes, it's Steph.
Damn.
Do this. You got to add more of that. Here's what you right. I mean, it doesn't do anything other than it. You know, the last time I ate a full candy bar, I still have it.
Sorry about
this. You can't
this.
do that anymore. A lot of people in this world, and I think in fact, it's worse than nothing, and it's less than nothing. It's an appeal to insecurity. They pile on unspecified negative bullshit.
So I have to redo that. I pushed wind back. It went back to 0 or to the start of the video. So I have to find the place where I went to. Sorry about that.
Until they hope you just give up your position. Oh, your position is so self-contradictory. Oh, you've not even understood the basics of Augustinian approach to ethics. Oh, this is just a warmed over rehash of Kant's categorical imperative, but you're too uneducated to even know these things. Do you have a specific fucking criticism? Do you?
Yes, I do. I have actually a very specific criticism. And the criticism is my complete deconstruction of your so-called framework of ethics, right? Now, I made it because I knew that if you're going to criticize a sophist like this, this is one of the arguments he would use why you are not valid in your critique, is that you are not referring directly to a quote in the book, right? So you cannot, you can't argue unless you have the direct quote, right? That's why I went through the fucking whole book, right? Or the first half, which is the so-called proof of the framework, and the second half I left out because that's just applying it to some conjured up moral statements, right? So I left that out. I might do that in someday when I have the time, if I don't want to destroy my day, right? But go and listen to my deconstruction, Stefan Molyneux, right? And get the shit together, right? But you don't want to do that. You want to use this one as a lever to frighten your congregation into submitting to you rather than inviting into philosophical discussions, right? Why are you hanging this guy out, right? Is it really that necessary? No, it's necessary because you're using him as a tool rather than doing good philosophy. If it was me, I would say, well, okay, I was looking forward to a debate. I'm not saying in the video like this, but contacting the guy and say, well, do something wrong, or what's the problem? I thought we were having a debate. I was looking forward to it, right? And then set up a new date and do the debate then, right? But no, that's not what a sophist does, right? He is exactly waiting for that kind of member of the audience, let's say, who has philosophical inclinations, right? But might not be that good at it yet. So that Stefan Molyneux can use his sophistic skills to use that person to leverage his own philosophy without actually arguing philosophically. It's sort of a politics, right? You attack your opponent and saying, look how stupid that opponent is, and then there's the only alternative is me, right? That's sophistry, right? So he's using this guy as a sophist tool to sort of pulling the herd together, right? The sheeps in the congregation need to have the sense that he is fucking going apeshit on his ass because he didn't argue the right way, right? It's not about enlightening new up-and-coming potential philosophers. No. It's about fucking using them as a tool in order to get your fucking cult together, right? That's all I'm seeing.
Do you have a specific criticism referencing something in the actual text?
Yes, I have. I am actually deconstructed half of the fucking book or the whole of the proof text. So please go and listen to that. If you are any kind of a decent philosopher, right? You would actually be interesting having somebody deconstructing your shit, right? And the problem is it's so full of bad philosophy that you have to reject it or pretend that you do not see any kind of criticism because it can't fucking hold water, right? There's no rigidity to that book. Yeah, there might be a few things here and there that's decent, right? But it's the wholeness of it, right? It has to hang together. It has to make some kind of sense, right? Recently, you had a video. I think I listened to some of it, and you mentioned that you were driving in your car with your daughter, and she said something like, well, can we drive on a bit further or something like that so you could talk to each other? Apparently wanted to ask you questions about UPB and so things like that, or things connected with UPB. Why? Is she 13 or 14? 13? and you have had 13 years to enlighten her on UPB, and she still does not understand it, right? You're talking to her every day. You're homeschooling her. You have your UPB, and still she needs to get something clarified about UPB. You might have some kind of critique of your own abilities as a philosopher and say, there just might be something that doesn't work in my book, since my daughter is still asking questions about it, right? If you had some kind of, self-criticism and didn't have this vanity and this megalomania that you built the whole of philosophy, right? Maybe there might be something wrong with it, right? Go listen to my fucking deconstruction of UPB and you might be enlightened somehow. I'm not saying I'm the perfect philosopher or anything like that. Possibly far from it. But at least I have attempted to help you understand how bad your book is, right? How bad your philosophy is, how bad your ethics is, right? It's to help you.
Anything? Have you found a contradiction in the argument? Tell me on the page where the doll touched you. Right? You got to look out for this descriptive stuff, right?
Oh, here. Now, okay, so now he's starting to use the guy. Now he's going to point out, when they do this, you should be aware. And when they do that, you should be aware. And when they do that, they are just sort of, they have this underlying psychology. They don't care about great philosophy. They care about getting you down so they don't have to face their insecurities and their limitations and so on, right?
Basic epistemological problems and metaphysical problems. What are they? What are they? The description stuff. People just describe how you're wrong without actually telling you how you're wrong. They're attempting to program you with negative opinions about something so that you will give up the position.
Oh.
And you understand.
How does he know so much about sophistry, right? Yeah, there's an old saying in Denmark. They say, "Tyv tror hver mand stjæler," which means a thief thinks that everybody steals, right? Or a sophist thinks that everybody else are sophists, right? It's sort of a kind of a Freudian slip or something like that, right? So why is he hung up on this sophistry? Because he's the master sophist. He can spot sophistry on 1,000 yards, right? Then, because you don't believe that he's a sophist, you believe he had built the block that he's walking around. He had built the whole of philosophy from the ground up or something like that, some megalomaniac claim like that. And you think he's a philosopher, but he is the sophist, right? He's manipulating you into thinking he's a philosopher, because that's what sophists have to do, right? They have to use philosophy, the power of philosophy, to boost them, whatever bullshit they want to pull on you, right? To gain something. I mean, it's obvious. It's his life. It is source of income. Of course, he's protective on his books and his philosophy, or philosophy quote, right? Because it's his livelihood. Maybe he has so much crypto and donations now, he could sit and fart into a microphone the next 60 years and still make a living, right? Or still survive. He didn't have to have another donation. But still, it wouldn't be the greatest show on earth, right? Seeing him farting into a microphone. But it's incentives, right? It's like Hume says, it's passion that rules the game, right? It's not reason, it's passion. It's your incentive that rules your identification of possibilities and their potential outcome, your rationality, right? So it's passion that rules rationality. There has to be some kind of incentive for what somebody does, and that goes for Stefan Molyneux also, right? It goes for me also, right? What's my incentive to do philosophy? What's my incentive to do this, right? I might be lying to you, right? I might be lying. How do you know? Well, you don't, because you don't experience what I experience or my thoughts, right? I could be lying and saying, I'm doing this for this great cause, and I'm just having a great time trying to pull down Stefan Molyneux. And actually, I have a great time trying to do that, right? Because he's full of shit, right? I like to point out bullshit, right? I fucking hate people who pull bullshit like he does, right? So I want to bring him down. I want to bring his ethics down at least, right? I want it to fucking get crushed because it's so bad. Everybody has an incentive for what they do, right? That's called rationality. And it's their passion or their incentive that drives them. So what is Stefan Molyneux's incentive for doing this, right? He's not doing it out of concern for philosophy, right? He wouldn't take some guy he doesn't even have the ability to present his own arguments, and then he's going to rail about him for 2.5 hours, right? Using her as a lever to solidify his congregation. I mean, it's ridiculous, right? Calling this philosophy is like fucking. I even have a comparison, right? It's ridiculous, right? Philosophy is thinking about how you think, right? It's not going off on a tangent, attacking people left and right, right? I'm only doing this because I want to get this motherfucking stupid idiot down because it doesn't work. It's so badly argued, right? I'm a little my blood is boiling, right? Because I so clearly sense the sophistry in this guy, right? It's so obvious, right? It's so obvious he's full of it. I mean, it's ridiculous, man. Nobody listens to a guy like this if they have them in their right mind, right? It's only because everybody basically in the world has been trained to listen to sophistry rather than philosophy. So if some sophists come and say this is philosophy, then they say, oh, no, oh my God, it's philosophy because he says it's philosophy. No, it is not, right? Not necessarily, at least. So I'm just like, I know I went on a tangent here, but it's just like, oh, man. Oh.
It's a great compliment. It's a fantastic compliment. When people only describe how you're wrong without telling you what you're wrong about, it's a massive compliment.
A massive compliment. Or maybe it's just a sign that they don't know what they're talking about, right? You didn't let the guy get to actually debate you, right? Right? You just, as far as I understood in the introduction, you just said this guy was supposed, I'm paraphrasing, supposed to come and debate you on your server, whatever it is, and didn't show up. But you did have some idea what you were going to debate about. And then you take that as sort of the content of the debate. But he's not presenting the whole debate before he's debating. So it's sort of in headlines of what he was going to talk about, epistemology and metaphysics, without any specifics. And then you use that as an argument against him. How pathetic, man. How pathetic. It's like reviewing the synopsis of a book instead of reviewing the book, right? It's ridiculous.
So, for instance, my issue with Kant's categorical imperative, which is act as if the principle of your action became a general law for everyone. Why do I have a problem with it? Because it's not objective and universal. The strongest man in the village would love for an arm wrestling contest to determine who gets the prettiest bride. He's willing to make that a universal standard. Yes, everybody should participate in an arm wrestling contest. I'm willing to have that as a universal standard.
No, I think you're misunderstanding. You're misunderstanding what the categorical imperative is. The categorical imperative is that you should, when you're performing an action, you should think of it as if everybody did this at the same time, right? Would that be okay? If everybody did this, it might be okay if only you did it, right? And it wouldn't maybe have that big effect, but you should think of it, universalize it, you could say in the Kant's form, that think about it as if everybody did this, right? Would it be good? Would that be right? Would that function? Would that work? Would that seem like a good idea? Something like that, right? It's not like, okay, I want to do this, and I'm going to tell everybody that they should do what I want. You're misunderstanding Immanuel Kant. Why don't you? Oh my God. Okay. You shouldn't use people as ends. And no, you shouldn't use people as means. You should use them as ends, right? It's not like, it's like those you interact with should be a part of the cost and benefit of whatever you do together, right? It's not like they should be a mean that you get them to do something and then you run away with the whole basket, right? Then you're using people to get everything for yourself. People should be a part of the costs and benefits of whatever interactions you have. Otherwise, you shouldn't interact. That's another formulation of Kant's categorical imperative, right? So you should visualize yourself, or visualize that your presumed action was performed by everybody. If everybody did this, would that be okay? And at the same time, you should think of other people not as means, but as ends, right? They are going to have a say in the contents of the consequences of these interactions. You're not just going to say, well, I'm going to interact and then I'm going to run away with the whole cookie jar afterwards, right? Then you're using people as means to that end that you have the whole, benefit from, right? So you're sort of kind of violating Kant's categorical imperative as far as I can see. But why don't you go and take some quotes from Immanuel Kant, right? Why don't you take some quotes? You're violating your own philosophy here, right? Why don't you go and take, if you're bringing up Immanuel Kant, you should go and take some quotes from Kant and say, this is what Kant is saying. No, you're just violating Immanuel Kant. And the same you do with Hume, for that matter, with Hume's Iseult and another, other of his skeptical insights, right? It's because when you do it, it's of course okay, right? When you do it because you're this big philosopher guy, everything you do is fine. Yes, nobody is speaking against you because they are afraid. They're afraid. They just pay their $10 a month to be in the nearness of Mr. Philosophy, right? So just listen to how he violates his own claims of decent argumentation, right?
But I get the prettiest bride. And then you might say to him, yes, but when you're 70, you won't be as strong anymore. And a younger person, I don't care. I've already had my bride for 50 years. What do I care about 70, right? I'm willing to make that a universal standard. Now, that's not UPB compliant, but that's just so I can type that out in about a minute. I can voice.
That's not UPB compliant, but you haven't presented UPB yet, right? Yeah, you might have previously, and you have written the book, but you can't say it doesn't fit with my understanding of UPB or ethics, right? And that's another point I'm pretty fucking sick and tired of, is every time he talks about ethics or morality, he has to frame it as universally preferable behavior. He is sort of controlling every debate about ethics by, using his terms. It has to be on his terms, everything, right? You have to work from my standards because I built the building we are walking around, right? It's obnoxious.
Dictate it in about 30 seconds. So there's an argument against Kant's categorical imperative.
No, it isn't, because you misunderstood the categorical imperative as far as I can understand what you're saying. To reiterate, he doesn't say that I'm going to make a moral statement and I want everybody to do that. It is actually pretty much the opposite that Kant is saying. Kant is saying, vision if this action you are sort of thinking about doing in the near future, right? If everybody did that now, right, would that be okay? And at the same time, this means and ends, right? This is Kant's categorical imperative. It's not about, I have this idea that everybody should do this, right? That's not what Kant's saying. I'm not saying Kant works or anything like that. I don't think it works, because personal judgments of whether or not something is a good idea or not doesn't work, right? It has to be something that refers to an objective standard, right? There has to be some objective standard, and that has to be, and it's a problem with idealism, that it's a problem that seems to be soaked or stem from idealism, that people stay behind they have to figure it out before they implement themselves on the world, because they feel that they are not a part of the world. I don't know, right? So it's a side effect of bad conclusions about idealism, I would say, but this is my framing, right? And not that informative, perhaps. But at least Immanuel Kant is the only serious attempt at creating a moral principle in the last 2,000 years or something like that, right? 2,500 years, maybe. A virtue ethics doesn't work, in my opinion, right? It's just be middle of the road and everything will be fine, sort of, right? It's not that. It's more like self-improvement, or Aristotle, right? It's not a moral principle. It has to be a principle. It has to be objectivity. It has to be objects. It has to be actions. It has to be something with what is going on in the world, right? It just has to. It can't be, I'm thinking this, and therefore I can tell you, it doesn't work that way.
So I can go through Plato. I could just go over everything, saying, I could go through Ayn Rand, right here, saying, like Ayn Rand, reason is man's tools for survival, therefore everything which, life is the highest value, reason serves life, therefore anything which interferes with the capacity to reason and act on it is against life. That's not true.
Isn't that what you said with reason equals virtue equals happiness? And I'm trying to connect the dots here, right? Wasn't that what you said? Reason equals virtue equals happiness. And what about this happiness? There's no everybody's happy because I did this. The only one I can have any idea of happiness is myself. So that's not important to morality, whether or not you're happy, right? Morality does not necessarily make you happy, right? If you are equating virtue with morality, right? I wouldn't do that, but if that's what you're doing, I'm not sure why you're bringing in virtue. And I think you are equating it with morality. But it's just like, he's all over the place, right? And when you listen to him, it's like you've been sort of slapped around, and you're sort of, you feel a little enlightened and you're uplifted, maybe, but you don't understand really what he's saying. You can't connect the dots, right? And this it's just be aware that it's a sign of sophistry when you don't see the clear picture of what he's saying, right? Because philosophy shouldn't be this difficult, right? To understand, or the conclusion of your philosophical thinking. It should be quite clear. You should be able to present it on, a one-pager, right? It shouldn't be that difficult if you have, condensed it into the right format, right? You don't need to write a 160-page book on how to argue. It's ridiculous, right? 160 pages of arguments to prove how you argue. I mean, it sounds a little circular even, right?
That's not true. There are people who act against reason all the time who are enormously successful in their lives. Now, you could say, but maybe they don't have existential levels of happiness. It's like, but he said human life, not human happiness. Reason serves life, therefore that which interferes with reason diminishes life. Life is the highest value, blah, blah, blah. That's all nonsense. I love Ayn Rand, don't get me wrong, but that's all nonsense. Now, sorry, nonsense is a description word, but I gave you the argument already. Think of Genghis Khan, the guy raped and slaughtered his way across Asia Minor. Now, 1 in every 17 people is descendant. He obviously liked doing it because he kept doing it. He was incredibly successful. His lineage was incredibly successful. His genetics were about as successful as any human beings in history. So this idea that somehow anti-rationality is negative to...
No. So you just mentioned reason. Now you're talking about rationality in anti-rationality. So now you're equating rationality and reason. Why are you doing that? It must be two different things. They are not the same. Why are you using two different terms for the same thing then? Why are you not defining terms? That's one of your, major talking points is always define your terms and so on, right? And use quotes directly from the book. No, you don't do that. It's only when people come and try to argue against you, then they need to bring all the baggage in. Otherwise, you say, I can't listen to it because you don't have the right quotes or the right, definitions or any definitions at all, right?
The flourishing of human life. It's just empirically false. So when people say, there are so many, the basic epistemological problems, says Isaac, they're just basic. It's like, well, stop telling me about how I'm wrong and tell me how I'm actually wrong.
Well, I have said it before, but when you're talking about behaviors, you cannot get to objects, right? Because actions are those that are working with the objects, not the category of the actions, right? It's like saying that you're buying fruit when you're buying an orange. You are not buying fruit. You are buying that orange or those oranges that you're buying or you're getting a hold of or whatever, right? You are not buying fruit. Fruit is a category that you have in your head, right? So if your philosophical system was about fruit, you could say universally preferable fruitiness, right? You could say it, but then there would have to be some argumentation that pointed the listener to how to interact with that specific object. There have to be objectivity. There has to be actions. You can't stay with behaviors, right? You can't stay with behaviors because you are never getting to these actions and this objectivity and this empiricism and this science and all this bullshit you are pulling, right?
Stop giving me the categories of errors that I have made. How about you give me these specific errors?
Yes, and go listen to my deconstruction. It's down here in the description. I spent something between 12 and 14 hours or something deconstructing the proof of UPB, right? Every fucking single sentence. There's a few things where I jump over because it's sort of fluff text that not necessary to deconstruct, but every important sentence in the book has been deconstructed by me, at least, right? And I try as best as I can to use rigid philosophical argumentation, right? So if you want something like that, why don't you go get it, right? But that's not your point, right? You want to pretend there's nobody who can actually argue against you. And that's why you're right. You must be right because everybody else is wrong. Look at all these wrong. They can't argue. Therefore, I must be right. That's your stick, right? That's your sophist stick. That's how you do it. You're not actually arguing anything because you're just going to say, well, go read the book then, right? And then come back and give me the argument, but you have to have definitions, you have to have quotes, and you have to have rigid understanding of philosophy and, bullshit like that. And 99.99% of people will say, okay, I give up. And if I have to argue or debate him live on the show and he's going to throw me around like the sophist he is, and, pull a rationality rules on me and say, hey, it's boring, right? Who the hell would want to fucking argue with you, right? And your book about UPB is so fucking badly argued. It's so badly argued. It's hard to point out how bad it is because there's nothing philosophical to refer to, right? You have to have your own philosophy in order to argue against it. And very few people actually do that or have that, right? And that's why you can live there in your sophist ivory tower and think that you have built the whole block you're walking around.
Because this is my question, right? So if I have an issue with Kant's categorical imperative, or if I have an issue with Hume's dictum skepticism that you can't get an ought from an is, oh, you just did. You cannot get an ought from an is. Oh, you just did.
But you are violating Hume. Hume doesn't say you can't get an ought from an is. You haven't even fucking read that quote either, right? The Treatise of Human Nature. He says that if you want to argue this way, describing the world, and then all of a sudden talk about you ought to do this or you ought not to do this, you have to bring in something that points out how you all of a sudden get to do the oughts or the ought nots, right? That's all he's saying. He doesn't say you can't get to an ought and ought not, right? To him, it's inconceivable how you would do that. But he doesn't say that it's impossible, right? He just says that if you want to argue that way, that missing thing where you're pointing to the oughts have to be brought in, right? And what Stefan Molyneux is sort of usual sophist word manipulation. Okay, so what can I do? Hume says you ought not. Okay, so isn't he saying that you ought not get an ought not? Right? It's a sophist trick, right? So he's violating his own argument because he's circular. He is begging the question by using the conclusion ought not as the as a premise, sort of, right? Or the deductive, the deriving or the deduction of the conclusion. Falsely, because he's using that's what Stefan Molyneux tries to pull on you, right? That he's saying because he's using an ought not and he says you ought not get an ought not. That's what Stefan Molyneux says. Therefore, he says, then I can give you all the oughts I want. So basically he's saying, because Hume made this argument, which he violates, he misunderstands what Hume is saying, along with a lot of other people who think that Hume says you can't get an ought from an is. He doesn't say that. But then he uses Hume's argument to validate his ability to make all the oughts he wants. So if Hume hadn't made that argument, he wouldn't be able to make his oughts. So he's actually using Hume to make oughts instead. So he's turning everything on its head so he can use it against. That's what sophists do, right? That's what crazy sophists do. It's ridiculous, right? And it takes a bit of understanding of these arguments he's pulling, because who can I have a certain sense of understanding of these things, so I can point out where he manipulates you, right? And that's exactly what I'm going to do, right? That's exactly what I intend to do with these kinds of comments or deconstruction of his philosophy. So I think I will call it quits soon, so I'll get back to this. I'm sort of 11 minutes into it, and there's still 2.5 hours to go, so let's see.
Which is, you say you cannot. Therefore, we've got one, we can have more, right? So
we got one, so we can have more? Yes. Wow, it's just like hand waving. No, I don't like it. So sophistry, and then Hume is bad, so I can do all the oughts I want. Yes. He doesn't even understand the significance of Hume's is-ought problem, right? He doesn't give a shit, right? He doesn't have any sense of skepticism or doubt or anything like that, because he's in the mentality of, I wrote this book. And because I wrote it, it's fantastic. It's perfect. Nobody can argue against it, right? I can argue against Hume says that he can't argue, but nobody can argue against me because I'm Stefan Molyneux. It's like, the level of megalomania, right? This kind of, it's kind of a narcissistic echo chamber of some kind, right? He's suffering from narcissism. I'm pretty certain of that. It's not, a full-blown, all-out narcissism sociopath or something like that, but he clearly has he has a pretense of being, subservient to philosophy, or have some kind of humility, but he doesn't, right? He's somebody opening a statement about a new book about philosophy, saying, I found the holy grail of philosophy. Go read my book, right? And when you open it, you see sort of a children's playbook or something like that, where it's like, what is this, the holy grail, man? What the F, right? I mean, it's ridiculous.
It's easier to type out the actual problems than it is to just keep describing them. Did you see what I mean? This is how you know it's total bullshit. Now, I don't mean to say that he knows that it is or whatever, but from a philosophical standpoint, if people give you a couple of paragraphs on how you're wrong without mentioning a specific instance, they're full of shit.
Yeah, but he didn't get to do it. Why don't you invite him into a discussion? Why don't you invite him in another time into a debate? But he's possibly afraid of your sophistry, right? And you think it's because and you're using it. I think you're fully aware of what you're doing, right? This is how you manipulate your audience into submitting to you without asking questions, right? That is a hallmark of a cult leader, right? It's a hallmark, right? It's how you manipulate people to not ask questions, right? They should be slightly afraid of you, right? They should understand that whenever they start to ask critical questions about the Bible, so to say the Bible, right? They will be attacked. Not least by you, but by all the other people who have submitted themselves into this cultish behavior. They are getting the pig dog within themselves to attack other people. They get a satisfaction out of attacking people and pulling them down, right? Rather than doing some decent philosophy. That's what free domain is about. It's a fucking sophist show, right?
Totally, completely full of shit. And where are the specific issues? Right? This is way back in the day when I first did my second essay that I ever published was Proving Libertarian Morality, which was the backbone of UPB. And people would just keep
proving. You can't prove morality. Proof is something you do with something that is objective, right? You can philosophize or make philosophies about what a proof is and what it entails, but you can't prove philosophy, right? It's a circular argument. You are saying that I can make some philosophy to create the standards of a proof, and then I can use that proof to prove philosophy. You see how bad this is, right? It's fucking stupid, right? You can't prove philosophy.
Telling me that I was wrong, that it was naive, that it was ridiculous, that it didn't take into account this or that, there were basic problems. And I said, look, the syllogisms are right there. The syllogisms are right there on the page. Tell me where the error is.
Tell me where the error is? Well, okay. Go listen to I think it's part 11 or part 12. Let me hang on a sec. I need to figure out which one it is. Just for your service. Part 11 of my deconstruction of UPB. I call it the syllogism from hell, right? And it says everything about how bad this so-called syllogism is. First of all, he doesn't understand Hume's is-ought gap, right? Secondly, he says he doesn't need to prove that murder is wrong, right? I'm not going around trying to prove something that everybody knows is wrong, right? Something like that. Thirdly, what he calls a syllogism is not a syllogism. There has to be some reference to empirical facts, right? Empirical objects, some kind of empiricism. He's word juggling universally preferable, sort of juggling the words around. It's not a syllogism. And fourthly, it's circular. Even if we give him the right to call it a syllogism, right? It's circular, just as rationality rules pointed out, right? And it doesn't prove anything. It doesn't create a moral principle, right? You, as a reader, has to bring in the moral principle that you then have to run through this UPB, right? And he shows in about 100 pages how to do this, right? Well, if I'm standing somewhere out in the world, I can't run my, moral principle through 100 pages of UPB, right? Because there's no reference to objects, because it's behavior. But I'm standing in the real world intending to make an action that upon some specific objects. but I can't know what to do about it because Stefan Molyneux is only talking about behaviors. So it's so completely useless, right? It's ridiculous, right? It's the most ridiculous argument in the fucking universe, right? He claims it's scientific, but you can't use science in philosophy, right? He claims it's a proof, but you can't use proofs in philosophy, right? It's like it goes on and on and on and on and on and on, right? And apart from that, all the other problems, no coherent definitions, no metaphysics, no epistemology in this UPB, it's nowhere to be seen how things work, right? There's a definition of truth that is so convoluted, it only makes you more confused afterwards. And add to that, he has before that 3 different kinds of truths before he made a definition of an umbrella term for truth, right? There's a little truth and middle truth and great truth or something like that. How does these hang together? No explanation, right? It's so fucking badly argued, right? Go listen to my deconstruction if you have the time. If you have sort of 15 hours you don't know what to do with, please listen to my deconstruction. Otherwise, go directly to part 11, which is called The Syllogism from Hell, and you get an idea of how badly argued this book is, right? Okay. I think we will call it quits here at 11 minutes and 52, and maybe there will be some follow-up parts, right? We're not even I haven't even gotten into the meat of the matter yet, so I don't know where it's going, this video, but let's see. We are approaching 2 hours now, so have a nice day. See you next time.